Introduce a little magic into your life.
Introduce a little magic. It's the first day of the weekend, and that's the conversation we'll be having. Our guest for the hour has joined in, big cartel buster, Senator for Kericho County, Senate Majority Leader, Aaron Cheruiyot. Good morning.
Good morning. What a title. But it's true, actually, what you're saying.
You're cartel buster.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Prof.
And thank you for sparing some time to come and talk to us.
No problem.
Let's welcome you with today's proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the country of Rwanda. A man's heart is not a sack opened to all.
A man's heart is not a sack
Open
to all.
Okay.
Take some time.
From Rwanda.
Take some time.
Okay.
What are they saying?
That the man is in control of his heart. He chooses what can go in and what cannot be allowed in. So it's not open to all. It's open to some. I don't know if I got it right, Prof.
My friend, there is no way I can add to that.
I'm a literature student, so...
You know, the beauty of interpretations is when somebody explains it well, you get perhaps an idea that you didn't even have before, and you say, but this is so true. Yes. And
You can actually relate.
Yes, the power of the proverb and the interpretation thereof is in how you can connect with it. And that is actually true.
Yes.
Senator.
Yes, Eric, good morning.
Salama kabisa. How's the life as a Senate Majority Leader? You know, in the leadership of this country now, above the area where you are for the last 7 years.
It's demanding. It's very challenging. There's huge responsibility on your shoulders. You now don't have the luxury of just saying, oh, somebody needs to do. You are now the one who has to do.
You're the somebody.
And, you're the somebody, actually. And the president loves reminding us that, by the way, there are no other leaders. It is you. Any problem that you see, the solution has to come from you. So there is a huge responsibility. But based on what I've seen the last few months, I think we are up to task. We have an idea what needs to be done. We laying the foundation is not easy. It's a lot of work, but it will be done.
Laying the foundation for what exactly?
For a prosperous nation. Many things that maybe are not right. We have a country that is in a very difficult situation economically, socially. There are many things that have colluded, both man-made and others beyond the construction of man. Others that are regional, others that are global, that have all constellated into giving us what you describe as a perfect storm. And you have to navigate and ensure that you get the country out of it. A lot of work has to go into it. And from the side that I lead, which is legislature, we are prepared. The sad thing, though, is that we haven't begun our work proper. Because of many things and many discussions that are going on. It's not easy to try and just radically change policy because as a country, we're in a place where we now know what can't work. And we're now having a discussion about, so what will work? And it's never easy because it's a tussle between there are people who are beneficiaries of the system as is arranged. Therefore, to challenge them and say, we think we need to arrange our society differently. You simply can't, anywhere where there's disorder, there's somebody who benefits from that disorder. And you try and bring order, you've got to fight and face off those who are beneficiaries of the system, broken as it is. So it's a difficult time, but then I see a lot of hope ahead of me because almost every conversation now is at the tail end, and perhaps in the next few days and weeks there'll be serious legislative proposals on our desk on what we need to do with regards to water sector, the electricity, energy, fuel, housing.
It's like every time we have a new administration coming in, they are rewriting things. They are undoing what's been done so they can do their own things. And you've used some of those terms, building a new foundation, deconstructing the system, changing the status quo. Why must we do this? I mean, we are the same country. Why can't we just build on to what you found?
It's because you've come from a campaign and people have told you what hasn't worked. There's no campaign that I have ever gone to, and I've been through maybe 3. This was the third one, the one for 2022, actively involved as a person. And when you hear what people are saying, hardly will you hear anybody speak in the crowd and say, hey, Mheshimiwa, don't dare touch this. This is working. Everything from start to finish is that education is broken, health sector is doing this, we need this in our roads, we need this in the water sector. So you come in and you're responding to the needs of citizens. When we say that we are rearranging, it doesn't mean that you're breaking everything to the bare minimum and starting from scratch. It's a tweak of very little most of the time, because at the end of the day, while the political class changes, remember the bulk and heart of civil service hardly ever does change. And many times when you get into government, and I've seen a lot of that, though we're really fighting about it. I've just been from a meeting the last 5 or 6 days where we've gone through. There was a conversation that was happening, triggered by the president, between the leadership of parliament and Treasury, his economic team, and all the 52 state departments, where they came, presented their budgets and defended what they need to do. And the term that you keep hearing from almost every other, what you'd call the core and heart of civil service, is that government does not do this. And then you ask them, so what do you mean government doesn't do it?
Who is government?
That's how we've always done it. And government doesn't buy second-hand vehicles. Government doesn't do this or that. So you get the sense that there's a pushback. So the truth of the matter, much as we change the terms most of the time, perhaps what is succeed in changing doesn't go between 15%, at most 20%, if you really push hard. 70 to 80% will still remain same old, because it's not easy to change the thinking of mainstream and hardcore public service. Most of the time they leave meeting and say, we've seen these guys before. They come and they start with all this fire. Give them 6 months, they'll be lost in all this. And I have seen that attempt in many things. You try and explain to people that no, that's not how we think it should be done. And you can see the pushback actually from their end. So it's not that we change everything like you say, but also we must not accept status quo. Yeah. There has to be a demand for something better. Of course, you listen to them, because you can't also be completely dismissive. They could be right in a sense in most of the things that they're saying, but then there are things that ought to be changed. And it doesn't matter whatever sector that you pick in our society, there is need to make things better.
There's always a need to. Let's park that, okay? We'll come back to that as we continue.
No problem.
Let's get this elephant out of the room. Okay, so you tweeted.
Yes.
And you said banks and media are the only 2 cartels that are left. The others you have dealt with.
Not dealt with. I said, I see, from what I see, most of the cartels might be crushed, or will be crushed actually. But there are 2 very difficult ones, which I think if we don't think deeply about it for good of society, we will continue to struggle with them for a long time. And for the sake of a prosperous and a good country, we must deal with the cartels in 2 sectors, those in the media industry and those in banking.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's just deal with the media. Why do you call us a cartel?
No. Hold.
Okay.
I'm listening very carefully what Mheshimiwa is saying. This man is very careful with his words and his wordings. He said cartels within.
Exactly.
The media and within banking.
Exactly.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Prof.
So he's not saying that the media is a cartel.
No. That's not what I've heard him say at all. I've been listening to him.
That's why I love this show, because this is a show of intellectuals, and you don't reduce things to be pedestrian and parochial. That when you say something, people just jump and say, "Hey, umetuita cartel." Like I saw, editorial of some of these favorite media houses trying to do. We are civilized society, and at the level that we are having this conversation, I appreciate. Many times, Prof and Eric, you hear people say that there are cartels in government. I don't see civil servants demonstrate and say, how can you call civil service a cartel, like the media is trying to do? Honestly, you can't be such impervious to criticism to the point that when somebody points out, you don't pause to say, please explain me, help me understand. What do you mean when you say that there are cartels working amongst us? And how media works. That's why I say they're very powerful. It's because they have realized Kenyans, and I've used this example before on this show. I think it dates back to the days of oranges and banana, yes and no campaign. And from that time, everything in Kenya is always reduced between left and right. There is no conversation that somebody takes the time to keenly listen and say, what exactly is this guy saying? So now the debate about the conversation that I started has been reduced to, is the media a cartel or not a cartel? Are you calling all of us a cartel, or are you saying that we are good people? I mean, and Prof here has taken the time to distinguish, which is what I hope to do successfully on this show, to say that just like in any other sector of society, there are cartels that have taken captive a very important space in our society, which is the media. A space that I love, a space that, by my training, if I wasn't in politics, chances are 99% of the time I'd be working in it. 90% of my classmates work in the media. There are people that I know so well, people that I engage. I strongly believe that there is no industry, actually, that I understand better in this country than the media. Because that's my training, that's what I consume a lot about it. But looking through the practice as is the last few months, I have said and thought through and said, given the important and the prideful place that media occupies in our society, if we allow things to go the way they are going, then we will lose a very, very important segment of society, such that people will no longer believe. You know, the worst thing that can happen to a country's media is when you get to a point where even when you give the most credible of report, it can easily be dismissed by the wave of a hand, and people say, forget about those fellows. We know what it takes for them. You know, media and the space that they occupy is so sacred, so important in a nation's progress, that you cannot allow it to go the direction that it's going. Truth of the matter, and I want us to tick a few boxes together here, that as things are today, when there is a report that is posted in any of our media houses today, what are the chances that every Kenyan will look at it and give it the attention that it needs without a second thought of considering saying, or it could just be the usual stories of these guys? Have we reached a point where people are beginning to double check and say, you don't believe first what these guys are saying, you've got to counter check? You know, as a person, and forget now, let's remove media. If Prof gets to a point where when he says something to you, Eric, even at a personal space, that Eric, I'm not coming to work today, is because I'm in hospital, you've got to send somebody to go and check if
this guy is actually...
Is that a good space to be in?
It's not.
It's not.
Are we there, though?
And that is where we are as media today.
Are we?
Yes.
What are you basing this on?
For example, and I'll pick about 2 or 3 examples. Forget about the ethics first. We'll come and discuss ethics later, because that's another space that is really wanting, despite the fact that if you read our constitution, Article 34 on freedom of the press, subsection 5, places us as parliament the duty to ensure that we set up the body, Media Council, or that's what we use in Kenya, to ensure that we protect our media from political and commercial interest. We'll come and have a conversation about that. But you've asked me, give me 2 or 3 examples of what people will doubt. The most famous example, your own Media Council the other day released a statement, and it was coincidence, because I don't even know that gentleman who released that statement. I just made a tweet in the morning. It coincided on the same day that they were saying the media houses that ran to Dr. Matiangi's house and beamed live, just focusing and showing his gate and saying there's a police raid, ought to have behaved better, because they should have counter-checked their facts. The truth has now come out, and it's eventually been established that, first of all, there was no police on site. Nobody had raided that house. But you know very well that there are media houses of prominence in this house, and I don't want to use your show to disparage any of your competitors or your colleagues in the industry that were being live and saying police are the home of so-and-so. You know, where is the place of counter-checking, confirming, and verifying, ensuring that whatever you're beaming live is correct. That's point number 1. Number 2, I follow and I read newspapers a lot. I have never seen a time such as this where media is being forced to swallow back whatever. Their apologies almost, I haven't seen the papers today, because when I came in, I walked to one of your studios, Every other day, we incorrectly reported this. Apologies because of the continuous numbers of suits that people are raising. For the simple reason that when you have a journalist sit on a desk and they are not being true to the calling of professional ethics of journalism of verifying a story, giving you the chance to even respond, and they go ahead and run with the story, then the following day you're being filed with suits, now more than ever. And keep a track, and I hope there are either Media Council or any of this organization, they'd bear me witness that there has never been a time that the media is being sued more than now because of inaccuracy of reports, misleading, or outright lies about a particular individual. So when an industry has sunk to such levels, isn't it time for us to be introspective about it and have a conversation without having to shout and say, there's threat to freedom
muzzle.
of... we're trying to be muzzled. Just like the way I enjoy rights, Eric, the media also enjoy its rights, but they do come with responsibilities. It's not, for lack of a better word, the license of a harlot, that you can be free to do whatever you want to do and nobody's ever allowed to question you. I don't think that is what we want of our media.
But then,
Yeah.
all those things that you've said, how do they point to a cartel? Because cartel would mean that it's deliberate, it's
Yes.
well planned,
Yes.
it's well organized to actually mislead.
If you ever doubted that there's a cartel in our media, didn't you see how that tweet was responded to? You know how cartels behave? When you say something, my friend, they are vicious, they are instinctive, they respond as a group, and they ensure that whatever you are trying to say is get lost in certain translations about it. I saw a dedication and I was so happy, and I said, oh my goodness, this is also a very good time. On the flip of it, I've never had 5 minutes of prime time on national TV being discussed. I looked at it and said, okay, it's not a bad thing after all, despite all the words that they use against the
You've made
primitive. I said, okay, maybe finally, I think I've made it. Honestly, I expected a proper adult conversation.
But then answer the question.
So the answer is this. Given the way they responded, because I've seen how cartels behave, they lock out their ears to any criticism. They never want anybody to criticize them. Number two, they choose to mislead instead of responding to the issues that are being raised. Is there an idea that for sure, as things stand today, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of bias, there's a lot of unprofessional conduct on the part of our media? Instead of people being open to that conversation and saying, what have you done about it? What you wish that we done better? What was the first reaction? Somebody wants to kill the media. I mean, why would anyone want to kill them? And for what benefit anyway? In any case,
But
we
this
had a
was the
referendum.
reaction after you had already come up with the term cartel.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what is it that you had seen that made you believe that this is, like you're saying, cartel means coordinated, means working with a script, means that all those examples that you've given us.
Because I don't think
organized for the
I
media
don't
to
think it is by sheer coincidence that every now and then there is some misleading information about, let's say, particular individuals or particular government agencies. Number two, who doesn't know that in this country nowadays, Eric, and this is a very unfortunate truth because I practice politics and I do this for a living, that in almost each of our leading media houses, there's a price to get a headline. And I've been through this and looked at it, raised it even with some of the editors that I know that, my friend, how can we get to this point where for 50 or 100,000 shillings, you can get a particular story about Eric if I don't like him? And you have that conversation and it's ongoing. You will only be burying your head in the sand if you want to hide and say, oh, is there anything of the sort? Number three, are we captive?
Is there something of the sort?
Yes.
Like for real?
Eric. No, but of course you're joking.
No, I'm not.
Come on, Eric. You know this better than myself.
No.
You know this better than myself.
What you're saying is a headline.
Yes.
On the front page,
Yes.
or the back page, or the top story of a TV bulletin,
Especially
or
the
top-
weekend auditions.
or top story of a radio bulletin, would have to be sponsored.
If you want to have it.
Somebody has actually paid to get their story as top or number 2, number 3 story.
If you want to have it for a good price, in this country, it is very possible.
So is there a red card? Because cartels then would have a red card.
Of course. 50,000, 100,000. Depends on the strength of a story. I have seen it many times. How many times do I even get a message and you're told there's something about you that people have heard? Hey, can you organize and get yourself? Otherwise, this story is going to run. And I'm supposed to just keep quiet about it and not speak? Eric, that's how cartels thrive. They threaten people. They bastardize you like they did to me. That's why I tell you, even in their behavior, if you needed a confirmation that there is a cartel in the media, just look at how they reacted to my tweet. Said all kind of nasty things about you. That's how cartels behave. They give a dog a bad name and they want to hang it so that it's never heard about it. Unfortunately for them, you know, I've dealt with cartels before. Last time in Parliament, I faced more vicious cartels with more money than the media can offer in the form of the tea industry. I succeeded before with it. I have done other things, so I know I have faced them before. That's why I laughed when I walked in and you said the cartel slayer is here. It's because I never back down from my fights. I don't pick up my fights every so often with anyone. By the time I come for you, I have done my research, I know what needs to be done, and I know how we will eventually conclude on this. I intend to raise a statement in Parliament, either this afternoon or next week, Tuesday, and ask our colleagues. We did a last, what is it called, enactment of an act of Parliament, ensuring that we have covered. Read, I don't know if you have a copy of your constitution here, but Article 34, subsection 5, on what is expected of us as a parliament to keep the standards of the practice of media in our country safe from both political and commercial interest.
Yeah.
Have we succeeded in doing that? Of course, the answer is no. Remember the kind of political interests that were being showcased in the lead up to the last general election, Eric. You know, we came here and we had this conversation. My side of the coalition was being given 1 minute just next to the sport news, while our competitors were given the first story for the first 20 minutes. Is that professional media conduct? That means we haven't succeeded, and there is evidence to show. Now the challenge comes back to us as parliamentarians and say, what is it that you're going to do to protect this space that is so important to the existence of a flourishing democracy, to ensure that they be buffered the way the Constitution expects of us from being captured by political interest and commercial interest.
Okay. So you believe that this cartel will be even difficult for the Ruto administration to deal with? The section that you've asked us to refer to, Article 34, freedom of the media, subsection 5, Parliament shall enact legislation that provides for the establishment of a body which shall be independent of control by government, by political interests or commercial interests. That's the body. And it shall reflect the interests of all sections of the country, of the society, and shall set media standards and regulates and monitor compliance with those standards. That Parliament has already done that.
No.
There's a creation of the Media Council.
It's called the Media Council,
which is independent of control by government. It's supposed to be independent of control by government, by political interest or commercial interest. The Media Council is supposed to reflect the interests of all sections of the society. The Media Council. It sets standards and regulates and monitors compliance with those standards. The Media Council. It even has the Complaints Commission. And it has ways, just like you've said, the CEO of the Media Council, on the same day as your tweet, released a statement regarding the report of the supposed raid in Dr. Matiang'i's home. Wouldn't you say the Media Council is doing the work that it was set up to do?
The question will be, if they had succeeded, for example, in part 2 of set media standards and regulate and monitor compliance, then we wouldn't have witnessed the kind of media buzz that we witnessed towards the 2022 general elections. Open, where we had media stations that were running hate shows live late into the night. We were having the kind of media bias against a particular candidate without representing the interest of a particular section of a source. If they had succeeded in living up to this expectation, then we wouldn't have had those kind of problems. So the
Media Council, remember, Senator, the Media Council released the report on coverage.
Yes, I saw that.
Campaign coverage.
I saw that.
And they raised issues and concerns. And they had sittings with the Kenya Editors Guild and such. And later the Media Council said, we have actually engaged the media on this matter based on complaints coming from the political campaigns themselves. And this is the response in terms of coverage, and they showed that there was a shift. That's a media council at work, isn't it?
They tried. They have done well. That's why that's why the Kenya Editors Guild now wants to take over the Media Council. There's a big fight of representation. Do you know that there is already a battle royale that is going on? Have you? I know you guys are practitioners in the media space, and you're looking back and you're saying honestly. And I've since then I've taken time to read through and ask people that work there, what is it that perhaps you feel is a greater challenge? And said we feel that apart from just reporting, we don't have any means of telling the media after releasing the report, that is where it ends. Unfortunately, the way you structured the act for us is such that we're just nothing but...
they don't have teeth to bite.
Not this, I don't know if teeth to bite. You know, the problem with our language as a society is that it's very violent.
It has to draw blood.
Yeah, something has to be beaten, and but... How do they ensure that there's compliance? What is it that they can do to a media house? If
How do they incentivize the media to comply?
Either the carrot or the stick, whichever works. And isn't it time that we had that conversation and said, because media is so important, Eric, to the existence and the flourishing of our democracy. And believe you me, I'd be the last person to want to see our media collapse, our media get to a point where they have lost their credibility, nobody still takes them seriously. Therefore, isn't this the time to have that conversation with Media Council and perhaps even invite them to Parliament? And I spoke with my colleague who's the chairperson of ICT committee yesterday and said, why don't you organize a session and listen to these guys? Because after I did that tweet, I knew there was a problem, but then I did know...
You didn't know how deep
this problem is until people begin to speak up. You had the report that was released 2 days ago, which media has refused to cover. That they said actually that in terms of safe spaces for women to work, that media ranks amongst the lowest in our society. That report is out there trending. Nobody in the media wants to give it coverage. Why? Do you know why? Which word did I pick?
Oh, it's cartel.
Cartels, of course.
Yeah.
My friend.
Let's take a break. Let's take a break. Okay. 24 minutes to 10. Kenya's biggest conversation. Senate Majority Leader Aaron Cheruiyot is our guest this morning. And we're talking about media. Yes, he's raised that issue. He says there are cartels. Thank you, CT. There are cartels within the media.
Yes.
And he believes that all the other cartels can be dealt with in this new administration. But these ones within the media and within the banking sector.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
I didn't know that Mheshimiwa's training was in media, but more importantly, I like his declared support for media freedoms as enshrined in our constitution. I have 3 questions I want to ask.
Yes, sir.
First question, if the media had favored your side of the political divide as much as they favored the other side, would you have raised the same concerns? Because the bias would still be there, and yet the bias was in your favor. That is question number 1. One of the problems that we've always had, if you're looking at our country historically, is that every new government, when they come up with the new ideas, yes, there's always this attempt. We had radical surgery of the judiciary, and yet amidst all that Kibaki government ended up with a scandal that was bigger than any other scandal we ever had in the country. So you ask the question, so what was all this about? Now, because of our history, we then raise the question, okay, the government is talking about, you are talking about crushing and getting rid of the cartels within the banking sector and within the media. And there's evidence to point to what you're saying. But then, how can we be guaranteed that people like yourselves who are now in government are not setting us up to create your own cartels who will...
You want to replace the other one?
One cartel with the other. Well, yes, cartels who will actually serve your interest. And lastly, the question I'm asking is, as you speak, when you talk about cartels, and given the one-sided leaning that the cartels tend to have, are you then saying that the media space in Kenya... See, I'm now being careful with my words. Not the media space in Kenya. Are you saying it's up for sale to the highest bidder? Those are my 3 questions. Now,
Well,
you take your pick as to which one you want to start with.
I will start with number 1. if they had favored my side of the political divide, would you still raise these issues, or maybe perhaps this is just a bad feeling about you still remember how they mistreated you guys and now you have the opportunity to squeeze them? I don't think it is, because there's a famous line, if you follow through our the statements we used to issue, actually, and I'll say this in answering both part one and part two of your question, that the strength of a country is in the institutions they build, not the individuals who occupy the leadership of certain institutions. What did we mean? Because if you read many of the statements we used to issue in the lead up to our campaign, that line used to feature prominently. I can disclose without demanding any royalties for it, that actually I used to most of the time personally insert that line into our communications as a campaign then. Because as a leader, having studied through how our society works and the success of various institutions, then I realized that the only thing that will make us a great nation is if we have institutions that can withstand the push, pull, and attempt to either cannibalize or do whatever to them from very powerful forces. And if we succeed to do that as a society, then we'll get to a point where it will not matter so much who's the occupant of a powerful office, either in state commissions or in government or whatever place. If you have powerful institutions that on their own have got an inbuilt system that can withstand any amount of pressure.
And you're saying you're
this
willing.
Now, this attempt and this conversation that we're having is just a self-reflection and looking back and saying, given that where we are talking about how we need to have reforms in energy sector, in water sector. Why are we living beside a very important segment of society called the media, called the banking industry? Shouldn't they be, just like we are having a conversation about all these others, be part and parcel? And I don't seek and intend to control it, because fortunately, it's not something that I can do even if I wanted to.
True.
There is a constitutional demand of it.
True.
That ensure that we have bodies that will provide and cushion them. I have laid before you and the listeners this morning that there is evidence to suggest and justify that indeed our media hasn't succeeded so much in protecting itself, that there is a continued threat on its free existence and thriving from both political and commercial interests. Therefore, then the conversation moves to the second part of it. How do we ensure that we protect it so that we continue to enjoy and have it for as long as we can as a society? That's a conversation we need to have.
True. But are you also saying,
yeah,
that you as a politician, a practicing politician, by own admission, and by the fact and reality of the fact that you are a senator and majority leader, that you are willing to swim against the tide? Politically speaking, how often do you hear of political parties, political entities, criticizing and working against a process that favors them, even if they know it doesn't strictly comply with the law or the constitution?
Rarely does that happen. That's
yes,
true.
exactly.
That's true.
So
rarely.
Yes,
I haven't said it can't. I said rarely.
I agree, and that is the reason why I'm asking.
But remember, remember one of our campaign pledges is that we said we want actually a robust opposition, 2 state agencies of accountability, which include the media. If we get to a point where, for sure, when media outlets criticize us for a certain policy and the following, we can be certain and sure that this is not influenced by either political or commercial interest, you will reflect. But the problem is, as things stands today, whenever you read a story on any of our newspapers, on any of our radios, chances are it's easy to dismiss and say, I think so and so must have reached out to them using the back door. We don't want to have that kind of media. We want to have, when they speak, they have their bridal place of respect, and people say, if you see our media has said this, then it's time to pause, ponder, and reflect. Shouldn't that be what we ought to build and achieve?
So in essence, you're saying, if we follow up from what I asked, the third question about our media and the space being for sale to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the media also should be robust and immune to the intrigues that come about, because what you're saying is brought about by people who are willing to influence the media to serve their purposes beyond what the media is supposed to do.
Exactly. Don't you know, for example, that when you use a media house, and there is evidence, and there has been cited before, that one of the leading media houses, and like I said today, I'm not in a mood to throw around names, and ideally I can't, because anyway, fortunately, when I say it, Kenyans know who I'm talking about, that one of the leading media houses was a tallying center of a campaign, one of the two main protagonists. You know, when you get to that level, how will that media house, for example, handle a loss like happened to them at that particular time? That's why they tallied when they thought the first 2-3 hours of results beaming in, they thought, oh, we are doing so well. Then they realized, things have gone wrong, and they stopped. You know, when you have those kind of things, it leaves a very difficult place. Remember, media owners as well. And this is something. Is there evidence to suggest that the media owners that are influencing editorial content and pointing to a particular direction? My conversations with journalists on the streets, and like I've told you, 99% of my classmates in university are practicing media people across this country. I sit with them, I converse with them, they reacted to my tweet, they send this or the other and say, perhaps it's time. I've taken time to listen and read through almost every message that has come in. Those who are insulting me and saying, oh, you will die and do that. Those who are saying, like your colleague Sadiq, those who are saying, no, you said the right thing. I take time to read and reflect. Impassionately so, and saying, I just want not to be emotional about this, but as a leader, reflect on it.
Mheshimiwa, if we're to have this sober conversation, let me ask a sober question. What is wrong with the media taking sides?
There's nothing wrong. We support that 100%. Have you heard me complain about media taking sides? That's not part of my complaint.
You know where I'm going with this? This same media council you speak of, come the elections, you know, they even pronounced and brought forth guidelines as to how one should report. Yes.
I followed.
They pronounced themselves on it.
Yes.
You are going to do this. And when they gave a report and they gave the percentages of the weight and the leanings of the reporting, it was based on what they had set out.
Yes.
Meaning, media houses were supposed to follow those strictly.
Guidelines.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So you can't say that you did not know what you were supposed to do. It was clear.
Yeah.
They laid it out. They made it clear.
Yeah.
Now, where I'm going with my discussion is this. You have stated your position clearly, but that's you, Aaron Cheruiyot. What's your middle name?
Kipkirui.
Aaron Kipkirui Cheruiyot. That's you.
Yeah.
Your ilk and those who ply your trade, if we are to believe that we are influenced financially as the media space, your ilk take almost the number one slot when it comes to attempting or trying to influence. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, how then do we divorce the media from what Kenyans have now taken as a norm, where you consider it normal for someone to buy lunch? Lunch has replaced the term tea.
Yeah, it used to be tea.
It was tea.
Now
it's lunch. Yes, which means tea was a small amount.
Yeah.
Lunch now.
And they don't say whether it's 3 course, 4 course.
No, they don't. It's just lunch. Soon you're going to hear plot.
Yeah.
Okay?
It will not be toa lunch.
No.
Toa
kaploti. Yes, exactly. Now, you, legislator.
Yes.
Your position, you have stated before. You're of sound mind and very sound reasoning. How do we tackle this? If we take you,
I am now happy because I think we are now home with this conversation. Because the way Prof has framed it, that's the space that I wanted us to be in this conversation. That away from all this noise and name calling and bastardizing me, which doesn't bother me for a minute. I mean, I'm a practicing politician. Not everybody supports me, so there's nothing strange about. You can't ridicule me based on how I talk, how I look, what I do. Those ones I'm past and beyond. But I like the space and where you have brought this conversation, because we appreciate that the media is a fourth estate and is equally important just as the other 3 estates. for the functioning and flourishing of any society, any democracy across the world. If we have gotten to this point where as a country we are getting increasingly concerned that we don't want to lose it, then so what should we do about it? And you've cited the example of what the Media Council did,
Yes.
and how they eventually issued a report and said, as a media houses, you failed on this score, you succeeded on the other. Isn't it time now that we brought this conversation back to Parliament? Because the Constitution actually gives us a mandate as Parliament that ensure that you do those three things: protect them from political and commercial interest, ensure that they are representative of all facets of society. 3, ensure that they keep the standards of practice. 3 things that has been observed or actually expected of us by the Constitution. Now the bigger question should be, upon invitation of either media houses or Media Council to appear before us, the conversation then should be, how have you succeeded in upholding these 3 key functions that the Constitution has given unto you, say as Media Council, and what has been your challenge? Like I have told you, for example, one that I've just had from following the conversation ever since this thing happened is the fact that they say, okay, we can release our report, but that's where it ends. What else do you want us to do? So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what else can they do so that people, when they speak, people listen, and not people actually, the media houses listen and say, okay, if our council has told us this, then this is what needs to be done. Editors Guild, because I've listened, despite the fact that they said very nasty things about me, and I mean, my job is such that I have to listen to everybody, those that like me, those that don't like me. I've equally raised their concern and said that their practice of locking out, remember, if you read the finer details of the act, is such that a practitioner like you, Eric or Prof or anybody, cannot sit in the council, because the general thinking being, you cannot come again to oversight that which you're doing. You will represent a bias of some sort. But then the editors are saying, if I follow through any of these regulatory bodies, there is always a representative of practitioners.
Yes.
If you go to JSC, you'll find a lawyer who maybe for the time that they'll be in JSC, they'll suspend their practice, but then they'll bring you that perspective that maybe there's need to include themselves, and that's why there's a fight. I've told you there's a fight right now over representation. Who wants to do the interview?
Yes.
If you speak to Media Council, they'll tell you Kenya Editors Guild actually want to take over our responsibility. So there's lack of clarity in law. And that's a conversation which I want to initiate in Parliament and have our colleagues listen through and streamline that which needs to be done.
Cheruiyot, senator, is part of the bigger script.
Which one?
Mambo yote.
Yeah.
So there's first an advisory from the Attorney General that says the same things that you're saying.
Yeah.
And that whole push on who sits in the council
yes.
of the Media Council, who sits in the panel that selects the people who sit in the council. Kumbe yote is part of that game.
Which game?
So what do you want?
No.
Okay, so who do you want?
We just want.
Who do you want to
We
sit in
just
the
want
council?
a professional media that's thriving. The same way.
If you do not want practicing,
I hold the view that there's nothing wrong with a practicing a representation from KUJ. I wouldn't mind. And by the way, if they came to Parliament and gave that proposal, I will support, with a simple view that in all other regulatory bodies that we have across the country and the laws that we pass, they have a practitioner representing. If you go to engineers board, you'll find an engineer seated there.
Of course.
I don't see the argument of saying that we don't want a practicing engineer sitting in the regulators board. If you go to this one of doctors, the same happens. So yes. I feel it's unfair to have that conversation and say that perhaps if you have a representation of a practicing journalist, chances are they'll just be gatekeeping and trying to distract you. There's a bias on that particular part. But it's good that we are speaking about this. The only thing that I plead is that the media, which survives on criticizing other people, other institutions, other facets of society, cannot be the space where they don't entertain or tolerate criticism from other people. That's completely hypocritical. It's totally wrong and flawed. That's the bottom of all this.
I agree.
We must have a
100%.
thick skin and say the same way we demand better of others, others can equally demand better of us as a house.
And they can say whatever they want to say.
Without having to shout that, hey, this guy wants to kill me.
What exactly
Surely.
do you mean? Senator, thank you very much for joining us. Come again. Can we have a date for next week? Because there's a lot that's happening.
Yeah.
For example, why is the Kenya Kwanza administration not talking about removing Dr. Margaret Nyakango from office, from openly admitting that she did not do things the right way? Its time is over.
There is a petition I've seen that's being brought to the Senate. Ideally, actually, the people that suffer the most to either acts of commission or omission are counties.
Yes.
So I have seen a petition drafted, and I think it will be presented to the House either today or coming days. It's a conversation we must have, because you cannot say I was forced. There's nothing like that. There's no such protection.
Let's end it there.